Welcome to Boombostic Health, where we challenge the business of healthcare and explore bold ideas that drive meaningful change. Each week, we bring you candid conversations with top experts, innovators, and leaders, exploring the latest trends and technologies shaping the future of healthcare. Join us and be part of the conversation in transforming healthcare. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Boombostic Health in the Wild. We're here at the JPMorgan Healthcare Conference 2025, and I'm super excited to introduce Adam Mendelsohn, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Vivani. Adam is incredibly well educated. I'll let him share all of that with you through UCLA, and also has come up with an incredible breakthrough for how to deploy or deliver GLP-1 medications that has great promise. So he's very much in the business of innovation in healthcare and a perfect fit for the Boombostic Health community. So thanks so much for being on. Appreciate it.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And you're local.
Yes, right? In Alameda, just 30 minutes away from San Francisco.
Very cool. So one thing that we just have to touch on really quick, do you use Waymo?
I have not used Waymo before,
okay,
but I think on every corner I see 3 or 4 Waymos driving people around since I've been here during the JPMorgan Conference. It is incredible.
Yeah, so we took one yesterday, and I think the capacity is supposed to be only like 3 passengers. We got 5 in there.
Okay.
And there was no driver to be annoyed. You cannot sit in the driver's seat, though. It won't let you open that door.
They don't trust you to handle the steering wheel?
No, apparently not. But it's fascinating. My business partner in Health Cloud Capital, who also runs one of our portfolio companies, Travis Morgan, he has the Waymo app and is just totally on board and sold on it. I think the novelty of it, but it worked decent. It was a little bit off-putting at times. Like, for example, there were a lot of pedestrians crossing the street, and the Waymo is, of course, designed not to run people over. So like unlimited people can keep walking across the street even when the light turns green. So there's this Waymo sitting there, and everybody's laying on their horn, and there's still people coming across the street. So they probably need to add some sort of like threatening, I don't know, PA system or something as well. Yeah. Anyway, I could go down that tangent even further, but much more importantly, would love to have you tell a little bit of the story of how you got into healthcare. It sounds like there was a family connection and got you excited, and then here you are. So maybe introduce yourself and give a little bit more detail how you got into healthcare.
Sure. So I'm Adam Mendelsohn. I'm the CEO of Vivani Medical, and I have been working in things related to healthcare ever since I was in high school. I was fortunate enough to be exposed to the business deals associated with medical device companies as a result of my father, who for much of his life would raise financing for medical device companies. Initially in the diabetes space, which I know that we're focused on obesity right now, but the GLP-1s were first used for treating type 2 diabetes. And so in a way, it's kind of come full circle. But I interned at a company called MiniMed, which is now a Medtronic company. But at the time, they were a private company and developing insulin pumps for people with type 1 diabetes, glucose sensors.
And about how long ago was that?
Oh, this was in the 90s that I spent time there. And that kind of exposed me to how engineering and technology could be used in a way that could benefit people's health. And I think that's where the bug started for me.
Well, plus it sounds like that was a fantastically successful outcome. They ended up selling to Medtronic.
They did really well. So I had the ability to see early on what a company can look like that ultimately has that kind of success.
And of course, the people who were part of that are investing in your company now.
Many of the people that invested in the early private rounds of MiniMed and some of the other companies founded by Alfred E. Mann, who was a legendary medical device entrepreneur, are people that I've known since I was a kid. And when this idea that has become Vivani ultimately won some business plan competitions during a PhD program, which I ultimately completed, they became our first investors. Wow. And it's been great to have people with that kind of long-term view. In addition, many of the people that were operators within those companies were advisors to us, which helped provide some comfort to the investors that we were being overseen well by people that had successful experience.
Very cool. So GLP-1s, you can't miss it. Everybody knows what that is, and it's pretty clear that we've got obesity issues in the United States.
Yeah.
In particular, in the state of Indiana, which is where our headquarters are for our fund and our 3 portfolio companies, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Clearly, there are a lot of people already getting prescriptions to GLP-1s. Why do they need another? What do we need that's different from what's happening now?
Yeah, so most of what's happening in the GLP-1 and related space is trying to develop products that not only cause people to lose weight, but to lose weight more quickly, to lose more weight more quickly, and to do so with fewer tolerability issues and possibly while preserving muscle in the process. But one of the big problems is that when people discontinue, which a large percentage of people do, then there's this starvation response that kicks in that causes people to eat more than they ever did. And much of the weight that comes back as fat. And so it really is important for people that go on this treatment to find a way of either having sustainable lifestyle changes and or to stay on treatment long enough in a way that that starvation response doesn't kick in and they can stay healthy for longer. What we're developing is a small implant that can provide 6 months of treatment at a time that could be administered at a doctor's appointment that would enable the individual to not have to worry about taking their medicine on a frequent basis for that entire duration of time. And we believe make it easier for a segment of people to stay on treatment for a longer period of time and get the benefits. And the way that we are anticipating positioning this product is not to compete against all of the new drugs being developed to cause more weight loss more quickly right now. But once the weight has been lost, as a way of maintaining that weight loss long term without requiring frequent administration, which only about 50% of people actually do adhere to prescribing instructions in the real world. So there's a real problem here, and we think we may have one tool to add to the toolbox for physicians and patients to be able to select from to be helpful.
So part of what I heard in there is there's this law of unintended consequences possibility where you have legions of people taking GLP-1s and they start feeling better, looking better, decide I don't really need this now, or just they don't go refill their prescription. And then the end result is they're in worse shape than they were before. Is that what you're saying?
That may be the case for some people. I don't want to overgeneralize.
Okay.
But there definitely is a component where the weight that is lost, some lean mass is lost, including muscle. And what we want to, so there are a lot of efforts right now to develop new drugs that will cause weight loss, but not cause as much muscle to be lost in the process. But what we want to do is make sure if someone is going to discontinue or try to move beyond the treatment, that they can stay healthy. And that doesn't happen. There is a lot of evidence, both in clinical studies and in the real world, suggesting when people discontinue, the weight comes back, it comes back pretty quickly. And that's not exclusive to GLP-1 treatment, but also to any sort of weight loss intervention that either is the result of someone choosing to consume less or curbing their appetite. All of those ultimately end up with the same long-term outcomes. So really the point is, how can we come up with a sustainable way of getting people to become healthy and stay healthy? And we believe that this approach will be something that a meaningful segment of people will be interested in, just like about 10% of women who are on contraception choose to have an IUD or an implant, about half-half. We think that we could be a compelling option to a meaningful segment of people that are currently taking GLP-1 treatment to make it easier to stay on treatment, stay healthier for the long term.
So let's just zoom out for a second. GLP-1 is something that clearly you know a lot about, and you'll probably forget more about this than other people will ever know. But I think there's also just an interest out there of what exactly does that mean, GLP-1, and what does it actually do?
Yes, good question.
Can you start there, irrespective of your delivery device?
So GLP-1 means glucagon-like peptide 1. And it does a number of things. The first mechanism that the initial drugs were developed around was amplifying glucose-stimulated insulin secretion. So when blood sugar levels are high, as long as someone is capable of producing insulin, then they make more insulin. And it became a very effective treatment for type 2 diabetes. And it was safer than insulin because when blood sugar levels are low, it did not cause more insulin to be produced. Insulin lowers blood sugar. So if you take too much insulin, it can be problematic. You can go into hypoglycemia. But if you take too much GLP-1, that doesn't happen. So you end up with high, regular, sustained levels of GLP-1, and that's where the industry started with these drugs. What then happened is some of the companies started to evaluate higher doses beyond that which was necessary for glycemic control and observed more weight loss being generated. The first example of this was Saxenda, which is based on a drug called liraglutide, originally marketed as Victoza, once daily injection. And that was the first GLP-1 approved for weight loss and chronic weight management. And now we have Wegovy and Zepbound, which are the two blockbuster products, weekly injectables.
So how long ago did GLP-1 first get introduced into the market?
The very first approval was in 2005, a company called Amylin Pharmaceuticals, and it was a twice daily injection called Byetta, approved for the treatment of type 2 diabetes. And then there was a once weekly version of that drug called Bydureon. There was a once daily version of this liraglutide drug. But really the first one that broke through to blockbuster status quickly was Trulicity, which was a once weekly version that Eli Lilly had developed based on a drug called dulaglutide. And in large part, I believe that was because it was the first easy to use weekly injectable product. It was easy to prepare the device for insertion. It had a very fine needle gauge, and the initial sales in the first year were staggering. Now, more clinical data was generated as time went on that showed the benefits of Trulicity over some of the former GLP-1 agonists. But when Ozempic came to market, which was similarly easy to use, like Trulicity, it also had tremendous uptake. And then as higher doses were evaluated, then you got Wegovy, which is based on the same drug substance in Ozempic, but at higher doses. And then now we have new mechanisms that are being added to GLP-1, like GIP, which is what tirzepatide is. That's Mounjaro, approved for diabetes, and Zepbound, approved for weight loss and chronic weight management, and many more in development right now. It's really an exciting, burgeoning field, and it's not surprising given the sales that are happening.
Right. So how big is this opportunity for your new, well, first of all, how big is the GLP-1 market for the business people out there? And everybody's going to want to line up around the block to invest in your company because of the fact that it's, I'm sure, some meaningful amount of that market. But how do we think about the size of this market?
Yeah, so the GLP-1 market is on the order of $50 to $60 billion, now. On an annual basis across the indications for diabetes and
that's just for the actual medication therapy, 50 to 60 billion. It has nothing to do with the impact on the overall cost of healthcare.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct. The expectations, because it's still growing rapidly, it's hard to peg it down because every year the expectations get significantly greater than the expectations were the year before. But I've heard estimates from 133 billion up to 200 billion, depending on the analyst and depending on the year that you're talking about. By 2030, the early 2030s, we're talking about a market it's already very big.
Sure,
we're talking about something that's going to be
there's plenty of addressable market.
Gigantic. And the way that we view our opportunity is for that segment of people that would prefer to have this kind of an implant, either because they aren't very good at taking their medicine regularly and they or one of their caregivers wants to have the assurance that that person is going to get their medicine, or because they prefer the convenience and don't want to have to worry about it. And as far as what that percentage is going to ultimately be, obviously we'll see, but what we know is that 10% of women on contraception choose to have an option that allows them to not worry about taking even an easy-to-use daily pill.
Well, I could envision having health plans or even large self-funded employers, for example, saying this is the required approach to this medication if you want us to pay for it. because it's the way to ensure that it actually has the desired effect. Is that right?
So it's been, for people with diabetes, the cost of non-adherence to payers has been measured to be about $5,500 per patient per year. So you're absolutely right. If you can guarantee essentially adherence, and it's not so much a guarantee, but it's much more, it's much less likely that someone's going to take the effort to come in to get their implant removed, which is what they would have to do to discontinue treatment with an implant, than to choose not to take their injection, or to forget to take their injection or their pill. And so we anticipate once someone chooses this type of an approach, they're much more likely to get the medicine, and that should have cost advantages too. In the case of diabetes, those cost advantages manifest in terms of reduced unnecessary visits to their doctor or unnecessary hospitalization visits, and that has significant ramifications. So there is a value proposition argument to payers that adherence improvement can provide. But there's one other point, which is one of the biggest complaints of GLP-1 therapy are the gastrointestinal side effects that people experience. And typically what happens is at the initiation of a new dose, a higher dose, there are some GI effects that ameliorate over time. And as long as someone is regularly taking their medicine, there are some fluctuations in the plasma level from dose to dose, but relatively minor. However, given that about 50% of people don't adhere to prescriptions, to prescribing instructions or recommendations, when someone misses a dose or two and then they resume therapy, again, there's a rapid rise in exposure level. And it's the rapid rise that can be responsible for the gastrointestinal events that people experience. So by having a product that helps avoid missed doses,
right,
we may help both on the efficacy side because we avoid subtherapeutic concentrations, but also possibly on the tolerability side by avoiding the impact of missed doses on rapid rises that can happen later.
So just to change the path of this conversation a bit about this obesity epidemic.
Yeah.
Where do we draw the line between folks that should be able to change their behaviors a bit versus more medication? And I know it's a sensitive subject, and I feel bad for people that struggle with obesity. Some people are very predisposed for that. And other people, gosh, it's just like, how much McDonald's are you eating? And I, again, don't want to be offensive, but that's the reality. So you're dealing in this business of obesity, providing a way to make the drug more effective, longer, and help the patient ultimately. Where are those patients that maybe, or those individuals who maybe should have like a prescription for better food, or a prescription for meeting with a personal trainer or something like that?
I think that, and there is a debate going on right now around whether obesity as a disease, where people don't have control over their ability to have a lifestyle that would enable them not to become obese. And there's a larger conversation to be had around the impact that policy and certain, subsidies and other kind of at the higher level governmental actions may ultimately have had in where we are today. I think that if there were a way to make access and to healthy foods better and more economical for people, and because the foods that people eat end up controlling their desires in certain ways.
Yeah, and certainly there's a very significant microbiome and gut health connection. But I'm even going to the level of saying prescribing food. So I was on the board at Eskenazi Health, which is the third largest critical access hospital in the country. And they serve the urban areas in Indianapolis. And we actually have these urban farming programs that employ people who are underserved, and also who are actually, it's a grocery that's got all healthy foods, where you get a prescription from your primary care doctor for these. This is your prescription. It's for food. And these are the foods that you eat. And it sounds kind of almost silly when you hear it, because you think, well, no, what gets prescribed are drugs or some kind of a surgery. But shouldn't we have some line of, order of things where it says, let's start with food.
Sure.
And then let's include in that some type of physical regimen. And I say all of this knowing that it's so hard to change people's behavior. And so I have a point of view for sure, but this is more of a philosophical discussion.
I completely agree. I mean, there's a pediatric endocrinologist at UCSF named Robert Lustig that makes the point that when we came up with the food pyramid in the 1970s and vilified fats, we incentivized food manufacturers to market their products as non-fat, but in order to make them taste good, well, you add sugar. And the sugar that was used was high fructose corn syrup because it was cheap, because of all the corn subsidies. And so the end result is people end up consuming more sugars, which we now know are actually not good for you, right? And fructose in particular, which Robert Lustig has done some studies showing can interrupt leptin signaling and make you hungrier, right? And so you end up with this vicious cycle of the foods that are
it's almost a
accessible and
crash
cheap.
that you have where then you need to continue to fuel that. And so, well, we could do a whole podcast episode on that, but I appreciate that you're a well-studied, educated individual who really sees overall health as, I think what I'm hearing, your mission is to positively impact health for people that are deserving.
Absolutely.
And not just, hey, let's start with giving people medications.
Well, one thing I've been hearing about the use of GLP-1s is potentially as a catalyst, right? It can
get you started, like the fuse.
It can enable people to have a period of time where their cravings are being curbed, and to the extent that any sustainable lifestyle changes can occur, it could potentially help catalyze that.
Right.
Again, I think the thing we want to avoid is an immediate discontinuation because of the starvation response. But maybe there are other ways of managing ultimately how GLP-1s could be discontinued without that occurring, while lifestyle changes happen in between. But as far as me as a person, of course, I would want people to be healthier.
It looks like you're fit and you're hitting the weights. Something's working. But so at our companies in Indianapolis, we actually have a really nice headquarters building. And one of the things we invested into is a fitness center in the building. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, we have an on-staff personal trainer. Anybody can sign up with for free. And we're in the hundreds of employees, so we don't need a lot of trainers. We have one trainer that you can schedule with. Mm-hmm. And we've had fantastic success stories. We have an individual who was a young man in very poor health. He was overweight considerably. He just started working out with this trainer little by little, ended up losing about 80 pounds. And is just, his energy is better, he looks better, he's more productive, which is really cool. So that's an example of something that I think makes a lot of sense as a benefit for employees. And you might think, well, gosh, that's expensive to employ somebody to train your people. But think about the impact you have even on just one person. So I think there's a multi-staged approach we need to take to people's health and well-being. So switching back to the business, and thanks for humoring me. I kind of ambushed you with that because we didn't talk about it before. But the question I have now on the business side, how much capital does it take to pull off what you're doing? I mean, this is a new device, basically, you're bringing to market that's novel. It has maybe some precedent applications. There's some type of a regulatory pathway you're going down right now with FDA. Could you just talk about that a little bit? And how much is that going to cost? How long will that take? And again, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, but our audience is a lot of business people who are curious about these things.
Sure. Yeah, so our lead product is incorporating a drug that is already in approved products. And what that we anticipate will enable us to do is to design our clinical studies to essentially provide the additional information beyond the information that has already been generated by the other programs associated with the marketed products to support safety and efficacy of the drug device combination product that we are developing.
So just to say that in like first grade words, there are already lots of people who have used the actual medication therapy that you're dispensing or delivering through your device. And you're able to rely upon all the evidence that that's a effective medication.
Support that. The FDA approves products,
right,
not drug substances.
Got it.
So we need to do our own studies, but we don't expect they're going to need to be as large as a new drug would require. Okay. It's still going to take a number of years, and on the order, well, we haven't publicly said the dollar amount, but significantly less than we expect a new chemical entity would take to get developed. An amount that, given the size of the opportunity, it should make for a very attractive, investment proposition as we go forward.
And you have trials going on now. It's a stage 1, you said?
Yeah, we just at the end of last year started our first in human phase 1 study. It's the first time this delivery technology.
At the end of 2024.
At the end of 2024, we just started the process, and we expect to have, it's a relatively small initial study, 24 patients total, but we expect to have some top-line results in the middle of this year. And assuming success, we look forward to a second study that would identify the right dose we would intend to use, followed by potentially a registrational study, which means a study that could produce data that could support an approval. So we're still talking about a number of years before we talk about anything being on the market, but not 5 to 10 years like a new drug would be, more on the smaller end of that.
So you're just reading between the lines. Maybe in a few years, could this be commercial grade?
Yeah.
Okay. And it works now.
Yeah.
Okay.
In animals.
Animals.
We've shown that it works in animals.
Yeah.
We've shown.
So where do you find a bunch of obese animals to test this on?
Well, you feed them. As an example, with mice, there are models that you can buy where the companies that make them give them certain diets that ultimately end with them becoming obese.
You order up a bunch of obese mice and stick the
implants in. You measure their weight changes over time.
They were hanging out eating Fritos and happy as they could be. And next thing you know, they're all skinny. They're like, what?
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. And people can do this with different animal models.
Yeah, they've got abs that are showing up. Okay, very cool. Well, it sounds like a really promising innovation, and ultimately this is something that insurance would pay for, or who pays for this once it gets approved?
Yeah, so, as far as the value is concerned, there's an argument that it's more valuable because of the adherence benefit that we expect will be associated with the implant and the cost that insurance companies would not have to pay because of adherence. But we expect that our costs are also going to be lower than many of the existing injectables. Most of the costs are in the device. The weekly injectables have one auto-injector pen for 4 doses, so 13 devices per year. We're only going to have 2 devices per year. So we have flexibility on the pricing side to go lower without eating too much into our margins. And we anticipate prices will eventually have to come down with competition as things go forward. But we have a lot of room to have a successful business with good margins in spite of that. So we're a long way from finalizing our pricing strategy, but in the range of what's possible, all of them are attractive scenarios.
Well, it sounds awesome. I commend the work you folks are doing, and clearly by helping people get down the path of having more of a healthy weight creates all kinds of positive outcomes. And people say outcomes, but what's that mean? I mean, it means that people are going to the emergency room all the time. That's not a good outcome. It costs a lot of money and not good for the lifestyle of the patient. Mm-hmm. So I hope everything goes exactly as according to plan. It probably won't.
Yep.
But I think it sounds like you have the kind of expertise and certainly the market and the connections that it would take to put together an innovation and an economic model that can be a breakthrough success. So all I ask is that when this all hits your wildest dreams and you buy an island, just let me come visit.
Okay. I look forward to that.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the Boombostic Health podcast, and thanks everybody for joining us. We really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you next time.